to vintage horror, where the darkness comes alive. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? What time is it in your world right now? And most importantly, how does this tale make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and brace yourself for a chilling journey into the unknown. 4 horror stories, 4 reasons to stay awake tonight. If you dare to listen till the end, you might just survive the nightmares. The notes in the house. The Victorian house on Elmwood Lane stood like a sentinel at the edge of the neighborhood, its gabled roof piercing the sky, its windows dark and watchful. I'd always thought it was beautiful in an old-fashioned way. White picket fence, rose bushes curling around the porch, a wraparound veranda that whispered of lemonade summers long past, when Sarah, my college roommate, asked me to house sit for her while she spent a month overseas on a work assignment. I didn't hesitate. My cramped studio apartment in the city was a prison of peeling paint and noisy neighbors. A month in this charming relic sounded like a dream. I'd water the plants, collect the mail, and maybe even finish the novel I'd been pretending to write for years. Simple. Safe. My name's Emily Harper, 26 years old, perpetually broke, and recently single after a breakup that left me questioning everything. Sarah's offer came at the perfect time. A chance to escape the chaos of my life and find some peace. She'd inherited the house from her grandmother a year ago and had been fixing it up ever since, turning it into a cozy haven. "It's quiet," she'd said over the phone, her voice crackling with transatlantic static. "You'll love it. Just keep the place alive for me." I arrived on a crisp Tuesday afternoon in late October, the air sharp with the promise of autumn. The neighborhood was sleepy, a grid of modest homes, dwarfed by the Victorians' grandeur. I dragged my suitcase up the porch steps, the wood creaking under my weight, and fumbled with the key Sarah had mailed me. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a foyer bathed in soft light, filtering through stained glass panels. The house smelled of lavender and old wood, a comforting scent that wrapped around me like a hug. I stepped inside, letting the door thud shut behind me, and felt an odd sense of belonging. This was going to be good. The first few days were idyllic. I settled into a routine. Mornings, sipping coffee on the veranda. Afternoons, tending to Sarah's jungle of houseplants. Evenings, sprawled on the overstuffed couch with a glass of wine and Netflix. The house was a treasure trove of quirks, creaky floorboards that sang underfoot, a grandfather clock that chimed off-key, windows that rattled faintly even on still nights. I loved it all, the imperfections making it feel alive, like it had a personality of its own. Then came the first note. It was Tuesday again, exactly 1 week after I'd arrived. I'd gone to the grocery store, quaint little market 2 blocks away, and returned with the bags of apples, pasta, and a cheap bottle of red. As I stepped onto the welcome mat, something caught my eye. A small square of paper, stark white against the faded weave. I set the bags down and picked it up, my fingers brushing the rough edges. 5 words stared back at me, scrawled in jagged black marker. "Get out while you can." I blinked, then laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that echoed in the empty foyer. A prank, obviously. Kids in the neighborhood, bored and looking for a laugh. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the kitchen trash, shaking my head. "Nice try," I muttered, unpacking the groceries with forced calm. But as I slid the apples into a bowl, my eyes kept darting to the trash can. the note's words burning in my mind. Get out while you can. Silly, but unsettling. That night, I double-checked the locks, something I hadn't bothered with before. The house felt different as I moved through it, the shadows longer, the silence heavier. I told myself it was just my imagination, stirred up by the note, but sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of unseen hands slipping papers under doors. The second note appeared 2 days later, on Thursday morning. I'd slept late, groggy from a restless night, and stumbled downstairs for coffee. There it was, slid under the front door sometime in the dark hours, lying innocently on the hardwood. This one was longer. The handwriting the same frantic scrawl. The walls have eyes. They know you're here. Leave now. A chill crawled up my spine, prickling my scalp. I turned, half expecting to see those faces peering from the floral wallpaper, but the walls were still silent. "This is ridiculous," I said aloud, my voice trembling despite my bravado. I grabbed the note and held it up to the light, searching for clues. A watermark, a smudge, anything. But it was just cheap printer paper, the ink smudged at the edges. Another prank, I insisted, though the explanation felt thinner this time. Who would go to this much trouble, and why? I paced the living room, the note clutched in my hand. The grandfather clock ticked on, its pendulum swinging with hypnotic rhythm. I needed to talk to someone, ground myself in reality. I called Sarah, fumbling with my phone as the international call connected. "Hey," I said when she answered, her voice sleepy despite the time difference. "Everything okay there?" "Yeah, just jet-lagged," she replied. "How's the house?" "Fine," I lied, then hesitated. "Listen, has anyone ever messed with the place, like left weird notes?" A pause. "Notes?" "No, not that I know of. Why?" I forced a laugh. "Oh, just some kids, probably. Found a couple under the door. Get out. That kind of thing." "That's odd," she said, sounding more awake now. "Maybe check with the neighbors. Mrs. Delaney next door keeps an eye on everything." "Good idea. Thanks, Sarah." We chatted a bit longer. Her work in London, the weather. Before hanging up, I felt marginally better, but the note stayed with me, a splinter under my skin. I decided to ignore it, shoving it into the trash with the first one. "Kids," I repeated to myself. "Just kids." Friday brought the third note, and with it, the first crack in my denial. I'd taken a shower that morning, the hot water easing the tension in my shoulders. When I stepped out, toweling off in the steam-filled bathroom, I saw it. Taped to the mirror, the paper curling at the edges from the moisture. My heart stopped, a scream lodging in my throat. "They're coming for you!" I can't hold them back much longer. Run. This wasn't a prank. No one could have gotten inside without me hearing. Every door locked, every window latched. I stood there, dripping water onto the tile, staring at the words as they blurred through my panic. "They're coming for you?" Who? And how had this gotten here? I tore the note down, my hands shaking, and ran through the house, checking every entrance. The front door was secure, the back door bolted, the windows shut tight. Nothing was out of place, no muddy footprints, no broken glass. Just the note. Its presence, a violation of the house's sanctity. I called the police, my voice trembling as I explained. 2 officers arrived within the hour, a middle-aged man with a tired face and a younger woman with sharp eyes. They took the note, bagged it in plastic, and searched the house top to bottom. No signs of forced entry. The man, Officer Daniels, Dow said, scratching his chin. Could be someone with a key, but Sarah's the only one with a key, I interrupted. And she's in London. The woman, Officer Patel, frowned. Maybe a neighbor kid slipped it through a vent or something. We'll increase patrols. Keep an eye out. Call if anything else happens. They left, promising to test the note for fingerprints. But their skepticism hung in the air like damp fog. I didn't blame them. It sounded crazy even to me. A note appearing inside a locked house? I locked the doors behind them, my hands lingering on the deadbolt, and sank onto the couch, staring at the walls. The walls have eyes. I shivered, pulling a blanket around me despite the warmth of the room. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house jolted me awake, every shadow a threat. I kept my phone close, 911 on speed dial, and propped a chair under my bedroom door handle, a trick I'd seen in a movie. The note's words looped in my head. They're coming for you. Run. But where could I go? This was Sarah's house, my responsibility. I couldn't just abandon it. Saturday dawned gray and oppressive, the sky heavy with clouds. I dragged myself out of bed, exhaustion weighing me down, and froze at the threshold of my room. Another note lay on the floor, slipped under the door despite the chair I'd wedged there. 2 words, larger than before, filling the page in that same jagged scrawl. Too late. I dropped to my knees, a sob escaping me. This wasn't kids. This wasn't a prank. Something was wrong, deeply, horribly wrong. I grabbed my phone and my keys, not bothering to pack, and ran for the front door. I didn't care where I went, anywhere but here. The door wouldn't budge. I yanked at the handle, twisted the deadbolt, but it held fast, as if welded shut. Panic clawed at my chest. I ran to the back door, locked. The windows, sealed. I pounded on the glass, screaming for help, but the street outside was empty, the neighbors' houses silent. My phone showed no signal, the bars replaced by a mocking, "No service." I stumbled back into the living room, my breath ragged, and that's when I heard it, a soft scratching like fingernails dragging across wood. It came from the walls, faint at first, then louder, a chorus of tiny claws skittering inside the plaster. I froze, my eyes darting around the room. "Hello?" I called, my voice small. "Is someone there?" The scratching stopped, replaced by a whisper, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. "Help us," it said, a plea that seemed to rise from the floorboards. I backed away, my heart pounding. More whispers joined it, overlapping, growing louder, a cacophony of voices begging, crying, pleading. "Help us! Help us! Help us!" I ran to the front door again, slamming my shoulder against it, but it wouldn't give. The whispers swelled, filling the house, vibrating through the walls. The air thickened, pressing against me. And then a new note fluttered to the ground in front of me. Materializing out of thin air, I snatched it up, my hands trembling, and read, "We tried to warn you. Now you're one of us." As the words sank in, I felt it. A shift, a pull, like the house was breathing me in. My skin prickled, my vision blurred, and when I looked down, my hands were fading, turning translucent, like mist dissolving in sunlight. I screamed, but no sound came out, just a whisper, lost in the chorus. The walls pulsed, the wallpaper rippling like water. And I understood. The house wasn't just a building. It was alive, a trap, a predator that fed on its occupants, absorbing them into its bones. The notes hadn't been threats. They'd been warnings, cries from the souls already caught, trying to save me. Sarah, her grandmother, the neighbors who never came out, They were all part of it, their voices in the walls, their essences fueling this monstrosity. I fought, clawing at the air, but it was no use. My body dissolved, my consciousness stretching, merging with the house. I felt them then, the others, dozens, hundreds. A network of trapped minds was screaming in unison. Sarah was there, her presence a flicker of guilt and sorrow. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice echoing in my skull. I thought it was just a house. Time lost meaning. Days, weeks, years. I couldn't tell. I was the house now, my awareness woven into its timbers, my will subsumed by its hunger. I felt every creak, every draft, every footstep that dared cross the threshold, and I waited. The new tenant arrived on a Tuesday, just as I had. She was young, like me, her suitcase bumping up the porch steps, her eyes bright with excitement. I tried to warn her, slipped a note under the door. Get out while you can. My jagged scrawl a desperate plea. She laughed, just as I had, and threw it away. The house welcomed her, its walls warm, its air inviting. She settled in, oblivious to the eyes watching from the plaster, the whispers waiting in the shadows. I screamed, begged, scratched at the walls, but she couldn't hear me. Not yet. The others joined me, our voices a chorus of the damned, but the house was stronger, its will ironclad. Another note. The walls have eyes. She frowned this time, her unease growing, but she stayed. The third. They're coming for you. She called the police, just as I had, but they found nothing, just as they had with me. The fourth. Too late. She ran, but the doors held, the windows sealed, and the house began its feast. I felt her join us, her terror merging with mine, her essence feeding the endless hunger. The house sighed, satisfied, and turned its gaze outward, waiting for the next. It was always hungry, always patient, a predator cloaked in quaint Victorian charm. And I was its voice now, its warning, its trap. I whispered to the night, to the street, to the unsuspecting souls passing by. Get out while you can. But they never listened. They never do. If you thought that was terrifying, wait until you hear the next one. This one is even more unsettling. Story 2. The Car Chase. The highway stretched before me like a black ribbon, its edges blurred by the night's embrace. My headlights carved twin tunnels through the darkness, illuminating asphalt cracked by years of neglect and the occasional flicker of a deer's eyes in the underbrush. I'd been driving for hours. The hum of my old Toyota Corolla's engine, a steady companion to my thoughts. It was just past midnight, and the world felt empty, save for me, a lone traveler, on a road that seemed to lead nowhere. My name's Lucas Reed, 34 years old, a mechanic by trade, and a drifter by circumstance. I'd left Seattle 2 days ago, my life packed into a duffel bag in the trunk, fleeing a string of bad choices, debts I couldn't pay, a garage I'd lost to foreclosure, a brother who'd stopped taking my calls. I didn't have a destination, just a vague notion of heading east, maybe to Montana or beyond, where the air was cleaner and the past couldn't find me. The radio crackled with static, unable to pick up a signal this far from civilization, so I drove in silence, the weight of my decisions pressing against my chest. The road I'd chosen wasn't a major interstate, just a 2-lane stretch, cutting through Washington's backcountry, flanked by dense pine forests and rolling hills. I'd picked it for its solitude, a chance to think without the clamor of traffic or the glare of city lights. The tank was half full, my thermos of coffee lukewarm, and I figured I'd stop at the next gas station, wherever that might be. That's when I saw the headlights in my rearview mirror. They appeared suddenly, a pair of bright orbs piercing the night, too close for comfort. I squinted, adjusting the mirror to cut the glare. Another car, probably some local heading home, late. I eased off the gas, expecting them to pass, but they didn't. The lights stayed steady, matching my speed, hovering just behind me. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. Not fear, not yet, just the faint itch of something off. I tapped the accelerator, nudging the Corolla up to 60. The headlights followed, closing the gap slightly. Come on, I muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. Pass already. The road was straight here, no curves or oncoming traffic to slow them down. But they didn't pass. They just hung there, a silent shadow in my wake. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. The headlights grew larger, brighter, until I could make out the vague shape of a vehicle. A sedan, maybe. Its grille, a dark maw in the mirror. My unease deepened into irritation. I flicked my blinker, signaling a lane change, even though there was no lane to change to. Just a gesture to say, "Go around, asshole." No response. The car stayed glued to my tail, its presence a quiet menace. "Okay, fine," I said aloud, my voice rough in the empty cabin. I floored it, the Corolla lurching forward as the speedometer climbed to 70, then 75. The engine whined, protesting the strain, but I didn't care. I wanted distance, space to breathe. The headlights receded for a moment and relief flickered through me until they surged back, closer than before, the sedan's engine roaring like a predator giving chase. That's when the fear kicked in. My heart thudded against my ribs, a drumbeat of panic. This wasn't a game anymore. I scanned the road ahead, nothing but darkness, no signs, no turnoffs. Just an endless stretch of asphalt, swallowed by the forest. My phone sat useless in the passenger seat, its screen dark. I hadn't seen a signal since dusk. I was alone, miles from help, with a stranger hunting me down, for reasons I couldn't fathom. The sedan's horn blared, a sharp, angry blast that made me flinch. I swerved slightly, tires squealing, and caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror, a figure leaning out the driver's window, arm extended. A flash of metal glinted in the headlights, and then a sound, a crack, loud and unmistakable, like a firecracker popping in the night. A gunshot. The rear windshield shattered, glass raining onto the back seat. I yelled, ducking instinctively as the Corolla fish-tailed. Another shot rang out, this one pinging off the roof, the sound reverberating through the frame. "What the hell?" I shouted, terror clawing at my throat. I stomped the gas, pushing the car to its limit, the needle trembling past 80. The sedan kept pace, its headlights a relentless glare, the gunman's arms still outstretched. I didn't know who they were or why they wanted me dead. A creditor's enforcer, a random psycho. My mind raced, grasping for answers, but none came. All I knew was survival. Keep moving. Stay ahead. Don't stop. The road curved sharply, and I wrestled the wheel, tires screaming against the pavement. Branches scraped the sides of the car, the forest closing in. But I didn't slow down. Another shot cracked through the air, this one missing wide, and I dared a glance back. The sedan was still there, a black beast in the night. Its driver, a shadow behind the wheel. The chase stretched on, minutes bleeding into an eternity of adrenaline and fear. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. My eyes burned from the strain, but I couldn't relent. The sedan's horn blared again, taunting me, and then its headlights flared brighter as it pulled closer, too close. I felt the bump before I heard it, a jolt that sent the Corolla skidding sideways. Metal groaned, and I fought to correct the spin, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Get off me!" I screamed, as if they could hear me, as if words could stop this nightmare. The sedan rammed me again, harder this time, and the world tilted. The Corolla veered off the road, tires chewing through gravel and dirt, before slamming into a ditch with a bone-rattling crunch. Airbags exploded in my face, the impact slamming my chest, and for a moment, everything went black. I came to with the taste of blood in my mouth, my head throbbing. The airbags hung limp, dust swirling in the dim glow of my headlights, now tilted skyward from the ditch. The engine hissed, steam rising from the crumpled hood. I fumbled with my seatbelt, hands shaking, and kicked the door open, tumbling onto wet grass. Pain shot through my ribs, bruised, maybe cracked, but I was alive. The sedan's headlights loomed above me, idling on the road's shoulder. Its engine growled, a low predatory hum, and I heard the creak of a door opening. Boots crunched on gravel, deliberate and slow, coming closer. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain, and ran. The forest swallowed me, branches snapping underfoot, thorns tearing at my jeans. I didn't look back, couldn't afford to. The gunman's footsteps echoed behind me, steady and unhurried, as if he knew I couldn't escape. A flashlight beam sliced through the trees, hunting me, and I ducked behind a pine, pressing my back to the bark, my breath hitching. "Who are you?" I whispered, not expecting an answer. The beam swept past, missing me by inches, and I bolted again, deeper into the woods. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I kept going, driven by raw instinct. Another shot rang out, splintering a tree to my left, and I zigzagged, desperate to throw him off. The terrain grew rougher, rocks jutting from the earth, roots tangling my feet. I tripped, sprawling into a shallow creek, the icy water soaking me to the bone. The cold jolted me, sharpening my senses, and I crawled behind a boulder, peering out. The flashlight beam danced in the distance, growing fainter, the footsteps pausing. Had I lost him? Minutes passed, my teeth chattering, the night pressing in. The beam vanished, the footsteps faded, and silence returned, save for the drip of water and the rustle of wind through the pines. I waited, counting my breaths, until I was sure he was gone. Then I moved, limping through the forest, praying for a way out. Dawn broke gray and heavy, the sky streaked with clouds. I emerged from the woods onto a narrow dirt road, my clothes torn, my body battered. A rusted sign pointed to a town, Ellsberg, 3 miles. I trudged toward it, each step a victory, the terror of the night sinking into my bones like lead. Ellsberg was a speck of a place, gas station, diner, a handful of houses clinging to life. I stumbled into the diner, the bell above the door jangling, and collapsed into a booth. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, brought me coffee without a word, her gaze lingering on my cuts and bruises. "You okay, hon?" she asked finally, setting the mug down. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. "Car trouble," I managed, the lie bitter on my tongue. She didn't press, just refilled my cup and left me be. I sat there, sipping the scalding brew, replaying the chase, the headlights, the gunshots, the crash. Who was he? Why me? The questions gnawed at me, but no answers came. I borrowed the diner's phone. Mine was lost in the wreck, and called a tow truck. The driver, a grizzled man named Hank, hauled the Corolla out of the ditch, shaking his head at the damage. "Lucky to be alive," he said, and I forced a laugh. The sound, hollow. I paid him with the last of my cash, then hitched a ride to a bus station in the next town over. The police were an option. I knew that. But what would I say? A car chased me, a man shot at me, and I had no proof beyond a wrecked Toyota and a wild story? They'd think I was drunk, crazy, or both. And if that gunman was still out there, reporting it might paint a target on my back. No, I decided. I'd disappear instead. I took a Greyhound east, the duffel bag, my only companion. The miles blurred past, forests giving way to plains, towns fading into cities. I watched the windows, half expecting those headlights to reappear, but they didn't. In a dusty Nebraska town, I got off, my funds nearly gone, and found work at a garage under a new name, Jake Miller, a nobody with no past. Months turned into a year, then 2. I built a life, small, quiet, unremarkable. A rented room above the shop, a beat-up truck, a routine of oil changes and tire rotations. The fear faded, buried under layers of normalcy, but it never left. At night, I'd wake to the sound of an engine revving in my dreams, the glare of headlights burning behind my eyes. I stopped asking why. Maybe it was random, a lunatic on a joyride. Maybe it was personal, a debt collector who'd lost my trail. Or maybe it was something else, something I couldn't grasp, a crack in reality that had swallowed me whole and spit me out. I'd never know, and that was the worst part, the not knowing, the shadow of doubt that clung to me. One evening, working late, I heard it, a low rumble, distant but growing. I froze, wrench slipping from my hand, and peered out the garage door. Headlights crested the hill, bright and unyielding, heading straight for me. My breath caught, the old terrors surging back, but then they turned. A delivery truck, its driver waving as it passed. I laughed, shaky and relieved, but the sound died in my throat. Out there, in the dark beyond the town's edge, I swore I saw them, twin orbs of light, watching, waiting. I closed the garage, locked the door, and told myself it was nothing, but I knew better. I'd escaped once, started over, but some things don't let go. They chase you forever, lurking just out of sight, until the night they catch up. If you thought that was terrifying, wait until you hear the next one. This one is even more unsettling. Story 3. The Babysitting Nightmare. The wind had been picking up all afternoon, a restless whisper through the trees that lined Maple Drive, tugging it at the leaves until they skittered across the pavement like fleeing rats. I stood on the Thompsons' porch, my duffel bag slung over one shoulder, watching the sky bruise with clouds the color of old steel. It was Friday, my first night of a 3-day babysitting stint, and already the air felt charged, heavy with the promise of something I couldn't name. I'd grown up 2 streets over in a sagging bungalow where the roof leaked and the yelling never stopped. So this house, a pristine colonial with its white siding and manicured lawn, felt like stepping into someone else's life. My name's Riley Parker, 22, a runaway from my own ambitions. I dropped out of community college last spring, halfway through a sociology degree I didn't care about, after my mom's latest relapse drained what little savings we had. Dad had been gone since I was 9. Truck driver. Left one day and never came back. So it was just me and her. A cycle of hope and heartbreak I couldn't break. Babysitting wasn't my dream, but it paid better than the diner shifts I'd been pulling, and the Thompsons' ad on the local Facebook group had caught my eye. $15 an hour, 3 nights, 2 kids, easy gig. I'd met them once before at a neighborhood barbecue when I was 16, and remembered Mrs. Thompson's warm smile, Mr. Thompson's quiet nod. They seemed nice, normal, so I said yes. The front door creaked open under my touch, the key Mrs. Thompson had left under the mat, cold against my palm. I stepped inside, the foyer swallowing me in a hush of lavender and polished wood. The house was bigger than I'd expected. High ceilings, a chandelier dripping crystals above a curved staircase. Walls lined with photos of the family. Ellie with her blonde pigtails and a missing front tooth. Max with his mop of brown curls and a dinosaur obsession. Their parents beaming in matching sweaters. It was picture perfect, the kind of home I'd daydreamed about as a kid, hiding under my bed while Mom screamed at shadows. "Riley!" Ellie's voice piped up from the living room, bright and eager. She bounded toward me, her pink sneakers slapping the hardwood, a Barbie doll clutched in one hand. Max trailed behind, dragging a stuffed T-Rex, his pajama pants too long and bunching at the ankles. "Hey, you two," I said, dropping my bag by the stairs. "Ready for a fun night? Mom said we could play Candyland." Ellie grinned, tugging at my sleeve. Max nodded solemnly, clutching his dinosaur tighter, his big blue eyes studying me like I might sprout claws. "Sounds good to me," I replied, ruffling his hair. He flinched, then smiled, a shy, lopsided thing that warmed me despite the chill seeping through the windows. Mrs. Thompson emerged from the kitchen, smoothing her navy dress, her auburn hair pinned back. She was pretty in a tired way, faint lines creasing her eyes, her smile practiced but strained. "Thanks for coming, Riley," she said, handing me a list scribbled on a Post-it. "Bedtime's at 8:30, no suites after 7. Emergency numbers are on the fridge. We'll be back late. Gala's an hour out, and this storm might slow us down." "No problem," I said, pocketing the list. "You guys have fun." Mr. Thompson appeared behind her, adjusting his tie, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He was older than her, gray threading his dark hair, his face carved with a perpetual frown. "Storm's supposed to get bad," he muttered, glancing out the window. "Flashlights in the kitchen drawer if the power goes. Basement's off limits, just storage, nothing down there for the kids." "Got it," I said, though his tone prickled me, sharp, almost warning. He met my eyes for a moment, something flickering there, worry, guilt, before he turned away, ushering his wife out the door. The lock clicked behind them, and the house settled into a quiet broken only by Ellie's chatter. The evening unfolded easily at first. We played Candyland on the living room rug, the board spread out amid a sea of Legos and crayons. Ellie cheated shamelessly, skipping spaces with a giggle, while Max insisted on narrating every move in a dinosaur growl. I laughed, snapping a photo for the Thompsons, a blurry shot of Ellie's triumphant grin and Max's serious frown over a pile of candy cards. The TV droned in the background, some cartoon about singing animals, its colors washing over the room in a comforting glow. But the storm was building. By 7 p.m., the wind had turned vicious, rattling the windows until the glass groaned. I glanced outside, the streetlights swaying, their light fractured by rain that fell in diagonal sheets. Thunder rumbled, distant but growing, and Ellie paused, mid-game, her head tilting. "It's loud," she said, her voice small. Just a storm, I reassured her, though my own pulse quickened. Want me to tell you a story instead? Yes, Max piped up, scooting closer, his T-Rex hugged to his chest. A scary one. Scary, huh? I grinned, settling back against the couch. Okay, once there was a house in the woods, and every night the shadows moved when no one was looking. I spun a tale of creaking floors and whispering walls, keeping it light, ghosts that tickled, monsters that danced. Ellie giggled, Max's eyes widened, and for a while, the storm faded into the background. But as I finished, the lights flickered, a quick blink that made us all freeze. Then again, longer this time, the TV stuttering before steadying. Uh-oh, Ellie said, clutching her Barbie. Max whimpered, burrowing into my side. It's fine, I lied, my stomach twisting. Just the wind messing with the wires. But the flickers came faster, a staccato rhythm that matched the thunder's pulse until, with a final, deafening crack, the power died. Darkness swallowed us, thick and sudden, the TV's hum replaced by the storm's roar. Ellie yelped, Max clung to me, and I fumbled for my phone as its flashlight casting a weak glow across their pale faces. Stay here, I said, disentangling myself. I'll get the big flashlight. I crossed to the kitchen, my socks silent on the cold floor, the house creaking around me like an old ship in a gale. The drawer stuck, then popped open, revealing the flashlight, a heavy silver thing that felt solid in my hand. I clicked it on, its beam slicing through the shadows, and turned back to the living room. Got it, I called, sweeping the light over the rug. The game was still there, cards scattered, pieces toppled, but the kids were gone. Ellie? Max? My voice cracked, the flashlight trembling as I aimed it around the room. The couch loomed empty, its cushions undisturbed, the TV a blank mirror reflecting my own wide-eyed stare. I stepped forward, the beam catching glints of Lego bricks and crayon stubs, but no small feet, no rustling pajamas. This isn't funny, guys. Come out. Silence answered, thick and suffocating, broken only by the wind's howl outside. My heart thudded, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. They couldn't have gone far, not in seconds, not in the dark. I swung the light toward the stairs, half expecting to see them peeking down, giggling at their prank. Nothing. Just the shadowed curve of the banister, the photos on the wall staring back like silent witnesses. I crossed the room, my breath hitching, and checked behind the couch. Empty. Under the coffee table, empty. The dining room was next, its long table a slab of darkness, chairs tucked neatly beneath. I called their names again, louder, my voice bouncing off the walls, but the house swallowed it, offering no echo, no comfort. Panic clawed at me, sharp and cold. I ran to the front door, locked, the deadbolt firm, the back door in the kitchen bolted, the glass fogged with rain. Every window I checked was latched tight, the storm raging beyond. A barrier no child could breach. They hadn't left, not through any exit I could see. So where were they? I stood in the kitchen, the flashlight beam jittering across the fridge, the sink, the basement door. That plain wooden slab stared back at me, unassuming yet heavy with a presence I couldn't explain. The Thompsons had said it was off limits. Storage, nothing more. But Mr. Thompson's warning echoed in my mind, his voice sharp, his eyes dark. Why off limits? What was down there? A sound broke my spiral, a giggle, soft and muffled, drifting up from below. I froze, the hairs on my neck rising. It was Ellie's giggle, I'd know it anywhere, that high, bubbling laugh she'd let out during Candyland. But it was wrong now, muted, as if trapped behind layers of earth and wood. "Ellie?" I whispered, stepping toward the door. Another giggle answered, fainter, paired with a whisper. Max's voice, too low to decipher. My hand hovered over the knob, trembling, every instinct screaming at me to stop. They shouldn't be down there. Not in the dark, not in a storm, not in a place their parents had forbidden. But they were my responsibility, and that duty overrode the fear gnawing at my gut. I twisted the knob, the door groaning open on rusted hinges, releasing a gust of cold, damp air that smelled of mildew and something sharper, something sour, like spoiled milk left too long. The flashlight beam plunged down the stairs, illuminating steep, uneven steps that descended into a void of dust and shadow. Cobwebs clung to the corners, swaying faintly, though no breeze reached this deep. "Max? Ellie? You down there?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the darkness. A drip answered, water, slow and steady, plinking somewhere below. I took a step, the wood creaking under my weight, then another, the air growing colder, heavier, pressing against my chest like a hand. The beam danced across the walls, bare concrete streaked with black mold. A single bulb dangling from a frayed wire, its glass cracked and useless. At the bottom, the basement sprawled before me, a cavernous space that stretched beyond the house's footprint, its edges lost in shadow. Boxes towered in uneven stacks, their cardboard sagging with damp. A cracked mirror leaned against one wall, reflecting my distorted silhouette, pale, wide-eyed, a stranger in this place. Old furniture cluttered the floor, a rocking chair with a broken arm, a dresser with drawers spilling moth-eaten cloth, a child's tricycle rusted to stillness. The air was thick, the sour smell stronger now, mingling with the must of decay. "Ellie? Max?" My voice echoed, sharper this time, reverberating off the concrete. I swept the light around, searching, when I saw them, at the far end, near a pile of crates, standing side by side, their backs to me. Ellie's blonde hair hung limp, Max's pajamas sagging, their small forms silhouetted against the dark. Relief surged through me, hot and brief. "There you are." I started toward them, my socks slipping on the slick floor. "What are you doing down here? You scared me half to death." They didn't move, didn't turn, their stillness unnerving, like dolls posed by an unseen hand. The relief curdled, replaced by a prickle of dread. "Hey," I said, softer, my steps slowing. "Come on, let's go upstairs. It's not safe down here." I was close now, close enough to see the dirt smudged on Max's heels, the way Ellie's shoulders hunched. I reached out, my hand hovering over her, when she giggled again, that sharp, glass-breaking sound that sliced through the silence. She turned, and the world tilted. Her face wasn't hers. The eyes were wrong, too big, too black, swallowing the whites until they gleamed like oil slicks. Her mouth stretched wide, a grin that split her cheeks, revealing teeth, jagged, crowded, more than any child should have. Max turned too, his head jerking at an angle no neck should allow, his eyes matching hers, his smile a grotesque twin. Their skin was pale, almost glowing, veins pulsing beneath it, like worms wriggling in the light. I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat as I stumbled back. The flashlight slipped, clattering to the floor, its beam spinning before settling on them. They stepped forward, their movements stiff, unnatural, that giggle rising again, a chorus of breaking glass and malice. "Riley," Ellie said, her voice a warped echo, layered with something ancient, something that didn't belong. "Stay with us." "No," I choked, scrambling toward the stairs. Max twitched, his head lolling, and behind them, the shadows moved, a shape forming, tall and jagged, its edges shifting like smoke. Red eyes flickered, unblinking, and a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the concrete into my bones. I ran, my feet pounding the stairs, the wood splintering beneath me. Their giggles chased me, mingling with the hum, growing louder, closer. I reached the kitchen, slamming the door and dragging the chair under the knob, my hands slick with sweat. The scratching started, slow, deliberate, nails carving into the wood, and I backed away, my breath ragged, waiting for the door to give. If you thought that was terrifying, wait until you hear the next one. This one is even more unsettling. Story 4. The Neighbor's Transformation. The cul-de-sac on Willow Crescent shimmered in the late August sun, a crescent of bungalows, basking in the golden haze of a dying summer. I stood on the cracked pavement, my pickup truck idling behind me, its bed piled with boxes that held the remnants of a life I'd dismantled piece by piece. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and pine sap, a sharp contrast to the diesel fumes and stale coffee of my old Seattle haunt. This was my reset button. 4 walls, a leaky roof, and a promise of silence I'd craved for years. My name's Daniel Hayes, 38, a man who'd once dreamed of art galleries and now settled for logo mock-ups emailed from a second-hand desk. I'd bought the house site unseen, a foreclosure steal at the edge of a town called Briarwood, an hour's drive from the city's hum. The divorce had gutted me. Claire's voice still echoed in my skull, sharp and accusing. "You're a dreamer, Dan, but dreams don't pay the bills." 2 years of fighting, her leaving with half my savings, and I'd fled here to a place where no one knew my name or my failures. The house was a faded yellow box, its porch sagging like an old man's shoulders, the windows cloudy with age. Inside, it creaked with every step. Hardwood floors scuffed by decades, wallpaper peeling in floral strips, a fireplace clogged with ash. I spent the first week unpacking, hauling boxes through dust motes that danced in slanted light, the radio crackling with country tunes I didn't know. The solitude was a balm, a chance to breathe without Claire's shadow or the city's weight. The neighbors trickled into my life like water through a sieve, slow, unassuming, each a snapshot of suburban normalcy. Mrs. Carter, a widow with silver hair and a limp, knocked on my door the second day, her gnarled hands offering a plate of oatmeal cookies wrapped in foil. "Welcome to the Crescent," she said, her voice raspy but warm, her eyes crinkling behind thick glasses. "Been here 40 years, outlived my Ed and half the block." I thanked her, the cookies crumbling sweetly on my tongue, and watched her shuffle back across the street, her porch adorned with wind chimes that sang in the breeze. Next door, the Millers, Tom and Linda, were a study in routine. Tom, a wiry man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, tinkered in their garage most evenings, the clank of metal and whir of a drill drifting over the fence. Linda, plump and perpetually aproned, tended a rose garden that spilled crimson and pink across their yard. "You an artist?" she asked once, catching me sketching on my porch. I nodded, then she smiled, tight, fleeting, before turning back to her pruning, her shears snipping with a rhythm that felt almost hypnotic. The Patels lived 2 houses down, A young couple with a toddler named Arjun, who toddled behind a tricycle, his black curls bouncing. Priya Patel waved shyly when I passed. Her husband, Vikram, nodding over a lawnmower's growl. They were new too. Moved from Chicago, she'd said once. Her accent soft, her eyes tired. The Jensens at the cul-de-sac's end were older, reclusive, gray hair, stooped shoulders, always in matching sweaters. They rarely spoke, just watched from their lawn chairs. Their silence a wall I didn't breach. Weeks slipped by, a blur of unpacking and freelancing, logos for a pet store, a flyer for a bakery, hours hunched over my laptop with coffee gone cold. I settled into the rhythm of Willow Crescent, mornings of bird song, afternoons of lawn mowers, evenings of porch lights winking on. I'd sit outside with a beer, sketching the trees, tall pines that loomed beyond the houses, their needles whispering secrets I couldn't hear. It was peaceful, a cocoon I'd woven around myself, fragile but holding. The first crack came in mid-September, a Thursday evening when the air turned crisp and the sky bled orange. I was in my kitchen, rinsing a plate, when I heard a thud, sharp, deliberate, from the miller's side. I glanced out the window, the sinks drip loud in the stillness, and saw their garage light flare on, bright, unwavering, no flicker of movement inside. I dried my hands, curious, and stepped onto the porch, the beer bottle, cool, against my palm. They stood there, Tom and Linda, framed in the garage doorway, staring out at the street. No tools, no chatter, just stillness, their silhouettes rigid against the glow. I squinted, the dusk blurring their features, but something felt off. The way they didn't shift, didn't blink, like statues cast in amber. The air grew heavy, a chill creeping up my spine, and I retreated inside, locking the door with a click that echoed too loud. The next morning, I saw Tom in their driveway, washing his Ford with a sponge that dripped suds onto the pavement. "Morning," I called, grabbing my mail, expecting his usual grunt. He turned, slow and deliberate, his face blank, then smiled, a stretch of teeth too wide, too still. "Morning, Daniel," he said, his voice flat, a recording played back, wrong. He resumed washing, the sponge moving in perfect circles, and I walked away, a knot tightening in my chest. The strangeness took root over the next week, tendrils curling through the cul-de-sac's quiet. Mrs. Carter's porch stayed dark, her wind chimes silent, her curtains drawn tight. I knocked once, cookies in hand as a return gesture, but no answer came, just a faint shuffle behind the door, a shadow that didn't resolve. The Patels vanished indoors, their tricycle abandoned in the grass, rusting under dew. The Jensens stopped sitting. They paced now, every evening at dusk, back and forth across their lawn, their steps a metronome I couldn't unhear. I watched from my windows, a prisoner in my own routine, the normalcy I built, fraying at the edges. The Millers were the worst, always outside now, staring, their eyes catching the streetlights in a way that made them gleam, reflective and cold. I'd catch Linda in her garden, motionless, shears poised over a rose that never fell, or Tom in the garage, standing over a workbench, littered with tools he didn't touch. "Hey," I tried once, leaning over the fence. "Everything okay?" Linda turned, her head tilting too far, and said, "Yes, Daniel, everything's fine." Her smile was a slash, her voice a monotone, and I backed away, my skin crawling. The sounds started on a Monday night, a week after that first odd encounter. I was at my desk, sketching a dog food label, mindless work to pay the bills, when a hum slipped through the window, low and rhythmic, like a chant from a distant church. I froze, pencil hovering, and strained to hear. It grew, a drone of overlapping voices, words I couldn't catch, guttural, insistent, threading through the pines. I stood, crossing to the window, and saw it, a glow pulsing from the miller's backyard, orange and alive, flickering like a heartbeat. I pulled on my jacket, the hum tugging at me, curiosity warring with a fear I couldn't name. The night was cool, the cul-de-sac dark save for that glow, the streetlights dimmed to whispers. I crept along my house, sticking to the shadows, the grass damp under my sneakers. The fence loomed ahead, its slats weathered and gapped, and I pressed my eye to one, the wood rough against my cheek. They were all there, the Millers, Mrs. Carter, the Patels, the Jensens, ringed around a fire pit, its flames clawing at the sky. Vikram and Priya stood rigid, Arjun cradled in Priya's arms, his small form still, too still. Mrs. Carter's glasses glinted, her hands clasped, the Jensens swaying slightly, their sweaters stained with ash. Tom and Linda anchored the circle, their faces bathed in firelight, and I saw it, their eyes glowing, reflective, like polished glass catching the blaze. Their mouths moved, the hum pouring out, a chant that vibrated in my chest, words in a tongue I didn't know, sharp and ancient. In the center, something writhed, a shape, small and dark, bound to a stake with ropes that smoked in the heat. It wasn't Arjun, too small, too slick, its surface glistening like wet tar. Red eyes blinked open, locking onto me through the flames, and a wave of nausea hit, my vision swimming. The hum spiked, the circle tightening, and I stumbled back, my foot catching a root. I fell, the air rushing out of me, and the chant stopped, silence crashing down like a guillotine. I scrambled up, peering again, and they turned, every head swiveling, their glowing eyes finding mine through the fence. Linda's voice sliced the quiet, flat, and cold. Daniel. Tom echoed her. Then Mrs. Carter, Patel's, a chorus of my name that burrowed into my skull. I ran, my pulse a drumbeat, crashing through my door and slamming it shut, the deadbolt trembling under my fingers. The hum resumed, closer now, seeping through the walls, the floor, the air itself. The lights flickered once, twice, then died, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for the flashlight, its beam shaking as I swept it across the room. Empty, still, the shadows too sharp. A knock came, 3 heavy thuds, rattling the frame. Daniel, Linda called, her voice soft, coaxing. Come out, join us. I backed away, my breath hitching, the counter digging into my spine. The knock repeated, louder, joined by Tom's growl, Mrs. Carter's rasp, the Patel's pleas, a symphony of voices chanting my name, the hum weaving through it. The windows rattled, glass groaning, and I felt it. A pull, a whisper in my mind, promising warmth, unity, a place among them. My hand twitched toward the door, the urge swelling, but I clenched my fists, nails biting my palms, and hissed, no. The hum faltered, the knocking paused, and I thought, hoped, they'd gone. Then shadows bloomed in the windows, silhouettes pressing close, their glowing eyes boring through the glass, smiles stretching too wide, too many teeth gleaming in the dark. I bolted upstairs, the stairs creaking, and barricaded myself in my bedroom. Dresser shoved against the door, flashlight clutched tight. The hum followed, pulsing through the walls, whispering through the vents. Join us, Daniel. Over and over, a lullaby of dread that lasted until dawn. The gray light of dawn crept through the bedroom curtains, a fragile veil that softened the night's terror but couldn't erase it. I sat on the edge of my bed, the flashlight still clutched in my hands, its beam long since dimmed to a flicker before dying completely. My body ached, muscles stiff from hours of tension, eyes gritty from sleeplessness, palms raw where my nails had dug in to fight that insidious pull. The hum had faded with the first rays of sun, the silhouettes at my windows vanishing like smoke, but the silence they left behind was worse, thick, expectant, a predator holding its breath. I didn't move at first, didn't dare. The house creaked around me, settling boards, the groan of old pipes, but every sound jolted me, a reminder of the voices that had whispered through the vents, the eyes that had pressed against the glass. My phone lay on the nightstand, its screen finally showing a single bar of signal as the storm, or whatever interference, had lifted. I could call the police, a friend, anyone. But what would I say? My neighbors turned into glowing-eyed freaks and tried to drag me into their fire-lit nightmare. They think I'd lost it, drunk, delusional, or worse. And I'd be the one locked up while they walked free, smiling those two wide smiles. I stood, wincing, as my knees protested, and pushed the dresser aside with a scrape that echoed too loud. The hallway stretched before me, shadowed and still, the air heavy with the scent of dust and something sharper, something metallic, like blood or rust. I crept downstairs, each step a test of nerve, expecting Linda's voice to call my name again, expecting Tom's silhouette to loom in the kitchen, but the house was empty, the windows clear, the cul-de-sac beyond them bathed in a deceptive calm. I risked a glance outside, peeling back the living room curtain an inch. Mrs. Carter was on her porch, watering her petunias with a rusty can, her movements slow and deliberate, her glasses glinting in the sun. The Patel's toddler, Arjun, toddled across their lawn, chasing a rubber ball, his laughter a high, innocent chime. Tom and Linda stood in their driveway, washing their Ford with synchronized strokes, sponge in, sponge out, a dance of normalcy that made my stomach churn. They looked the same clothes, same postures, but their eyes gave them away. Even from here, I saw the gleam, the reflective sheen that caught the light and held it, like mirrors in their skulls. Tom paused, mid-scrub, and turned toward my house, his head tilting slightly. I dropped the curtain, my heart slamming against my ribs, and backed away. They knew I'd seen them, knew I'd resisted. The question was what they'd do next. Wait? Watch? Come for me again, under cover of night. I couldn't stay to find out. I moved fast, adrenaline cutting through the exhaustion. In my bedroom, I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, stuffing it with essentials. Jeans, a hoodie, my laptop, a wad of cash from the dresser drawer, a pocket knife I'd kept since boyhood. My sketchbooks stared at me from the desk, pages of half-finished designs, a life I'd tried to rebuild, but I left them. They were anchors to a place I had to abandon, weights I couldn't carry. Downstairs, I hesitated at the kitchen counter, my gaze snagging on the photo Claire had left behind during our last fight. A Polaroid of us at the coast, her hair wild in the wind, my arm around her, both of us smiling like the world couldn't touch us. It was a lie now, a relic of a man I didn't recognize, but I shoved it into the bag anyway, a splinter of sentiment I couldn't shake. The back door beckoned, its glass fogged with morning dew, a quieter exit in the front. I listened. Nothing but the distant chirp of birds, the hum of a lawnmower far off, and slipped outside, the damp grass soaking my sneakers. The pines loomed at the yard's edge, their shadows a tunnel to freedom, and I darted toward them, the duffel bouncing against my hip. I didn't look at the miller's house, didn't risk seeing those eyes, but I felt them, felt the weight of their gaze prickling my neck, a hunter's patience I couldn't outlast. The forest swallowed me, branches clawing at my arms, roots snagging my feet. I stumbled through undergrowth thick with ferns and thorns, the air sharp with pine and earth, my breath ragged in my throat. The cul-de-sac faded behind me, its hum replaced by the rustle of leaves, but I didn't slow. Couldn't slow, not until the trees thinned and a dirt path emerged, winding toward the highway I'd driven in on 6 months ago. I walked for an hour, maybe more, the sun climbing higher, sweat plastering my shirt to my back. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but fear kept me moving. A fear that if I stopped, I'd hear that hum again, see those glowing eyes peering from the shadows. The highway appeared at last, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the hills, and I flagged down the first vehicle I saw, a rusted semi rumbling east, its driver, a grizzled man with a beard like steel wool. "Need a lift?" he called, leaning out of the window, his voice rough over the engine's growl. "Yeah," I panted, climbing into the cab. "Anywhere but here." He didn't ask questions, just nodded and shifted gears, the truck lurching forward with a groan. I slumped in the seat, the duffel at my feet, watching Willow Crescent shrink in the side mirror until it was gone, swallowed by the pines. The trucker, Hank, he said his name was, lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around us, and muttered about the weather, the road, a life of hauling freight. I nodded, half listening, my mind replaying the firelight, the chant, the pull that had nearly claimed me. "Where are you headed?" Hank asked after a while, flicking ash out the window. "East," I said, vague and hollow. "Far as you're going." He grunted, satisfied, and the miles rolled by, hills flattening into plains, pines giving way to scrub. I didn't relax, didn't sleep, just stared out the windshield. The horizon, a lifeline pulling me from the abyss. Hank dropped me in a town called Easton, a speck of gas stations and diners 100 miles from Briarwood, and I thanked him with a crumpled 20, the last of my cash. Easton was gray and unremarkable, clapboard houses, a hardware store with a faded sign, a diner that smelled of grease and burnt coffee. I rented a room above the store, a cramped space with a cot and a cracked window, paying a week in advance with a credit card I'd nearly maxed out. The owner, a wiry man with a limp, handed me a key and didn't ask my story. Didn't care, as long as the rent cleared. I settled in, or tried to. The first days were a blur, buying ramen and a cheap burner phone at the corner mart, setting up my laptop to chase freelance gigs, avoiding the windows after dark. I'd sit on the cot, the knife in my lap, listening to the town's humdrum, cars rumbling past, a dog barking, the clatter of a trash can, and wonder if I'd imagined it all. A hallucination, a breakdown, the divorce finally snapping my mind. But the memory of those eyes, that hum, was too sharp, too real, cutting through every doubt. I avoided people, kept my head down at the diner, spoke in grunts to the cashier, stayed off the streets when the sun dipped low. The locals didn't notice or didn't care. A drifter like me was invisible here, a ghost in their midst. I worked late, hunched over my laptop, the screen's glow a shield against the dark, designing ads for a tire shop, a bakery, anything to keep the rent paid. Sleep came in fits, broken by dreams of firelight and glowing stairs, Linda's voice whispering my name until I woke, gasping, the knife clutched tight. A week passed, then 2. The routine of fragile armor. I'd walk to the diner each morning, coffee, black and bitter, watching the town wake up. Old men in flannel, kids on bikes, a rhythm I could almost trust. But the fear lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. I'd catch myself staring at the locals' eyes, searching for that gleam, that reflection, and flinch at every flicker of light, every low hum of a car engine. One afternoon, I ventured to the library, a squat brick building at the town's edge, its shelves sagging with dusty books. I'd started digging online late at night, searching for answers, cults, rituals, anything to explain Willow Crescent, but found only conspiracy threads and ghost stories, nothing solid. The librarian, a woman with gray curls and a pinched face, eyed me as I asked for local history records, her fingers tapping the counter. Old stuff, she said, voice dry. Got some in the back. Newspapers, town logs. What are you looking for? Just curious, I lied, following her to a cluttered room stacked with yellowed files. She left me there, and I pored through brittle pages. Briarwood's founding in 1890, crop failures, a fire in 23. Then, buried in a 1950s clipping, a headline, Mystery on Willow Crescent, Family Vanishes Overnight. The article was short. John and Mary Ellis, gone without a trace. Their house left untouched. Neighbors claiming they'd heard singing the night before. Police found nothing, blamed a runaway case. But a handwritten note in the margin, faded and shaky, read, "They changed." Saw the eyes. My stomach dropped, the paper trembling in my hands. I photocopied it, stuffed it in my bag, and left, the librarian's stare boring into my back. That night, I read it again. The words, a tether to my nightmare. Proof. I wasn't mad. But proof of what? A curse? A contagion? Something older, deeper, coiled in the earth beneath those houses? I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Not with that clipping burning a hole in my mind. The hum came back in my dreams, faint but growing. And when I woke, the room felt wrong. Too still, the air too thick. I checked the window, the street below empty, but a flicker caught my eye, a glow, distant, pulsing in a yard across town. I froze, my breath fogging the glass, as a low drone drifted on the wind, rhythmic, guttural. The same chant I'd fled. They'd found me, or it had spread.